All right, how's it going, everybody? Feels like it's been a while. My name is Amos, and just the other day on the YouTube channel, I posted a poll, and I was like, hey, man of the people, what stock deserves the next deep dive and analysis video? 50% of you, out of the 315 votes, so about 150 of you, okay, you voted for Meta. Second place was Texas Instruments, and then Duolingo. I feel like after going through all the different comments of all the various stocks, I feel like I should refer to this poll in order to make the next analysis videos as well. So just because I'm doing Meta today does not mean I'm going to be neglecting Duolingo, Texas Instruments, and some of the others that are in the comments section. So today, friends and family, we're going to be talking about Meta. And as you can see on your screen right now, year to date, 3.7% into the green when you think about 11 months. Are you freaking kidding me? For a magnificent 7, a Mag 7 stock to only be in the green by 3.7%. I mean, to put it into perspective, if we think about, I don't know, Microsoft year to date, 18.7%. So for Meta, aka Facebook, dude, I'm so old, I can't think about Meta as being Meta. I always think about them as Facebook. So if I call them Facebook, just understand where I'm coming from, okay? So year to date, 3.7%. And if we just consider the past 5 days, negative 5.4%. Past 1 month, negative 12.8%. So here's the thing. I personally think that the fear surrounding Meta right now is overblown. Because do you remember on this YouTube channel, there are receipts, okay? You can pause this video and you can look it up. Do you remember when I said that NVIDIA was undervalued and I pumped thousands of dollars into it, and sure enough, it exploded with due time. Then I said the exact same thing about Microsoft, Google, and even Amazon. That's my biggest conviction play right now, Amazon. And each time it played out. Now, I will caveat by saying, I think I was a little too early with Google, but I wasn't wrong because I was pumping money into Google back in February, March, and then in April, it just sold off even further. That gave me the opportunity to lower my cost basis, but eventually with due time, even Google exploded. And so what I see happening right now is with Meta, I think it's going to be their turn next. As of right now, to have a PE ratio of a 27, I think they're undervalued. And I'll show you why. So if that sounds good with you, let's dig into this together. Now, before we go any further, I just want to let you know, full transparency, this is not my first rodeo. And what I mean by that is if we just zoom out and take a look at Meta's stock price history leading up to September 2021, they were $376 a share. But then the investor confidence in the company was just absolutely shattered because Zuckerberg, he kept hyping up and talking about the metaverse, where everyone was going to mingle in a virtual world and how you were going to be able to talk to any historical figure, role play, and etc. And the investors just weren't having it. So consequently, the stock just sold off. And also, I think some of their numbers, like the engagement, the monthly active users, it had a slight dip as well. So there was a lot of speed bumps, headwinds, and a lot of fear and uncertainty surrounding Facebook at the time. So consequently, as you can see, from peak to valley, they lost $248 in their share price. We're talking about 65.6% into the red. Now, what did I do? In 2022, I decided to go gung-ho and I started dollar cost averaging into Facebook when they reached about $100 per share. And when they dipped below that mark and they were like 95, 94, 92, dude, I was putting everything that I had into it. My conviction was so high because I knew that the market, they had it wrong. Their PE ratio at the time, if my memory serves me right, it was a single digit number. It was like an 8 or a 9. And I kept thinking, dude, as much as you might hate Zuckerberg or Facebook or Instagram, it's here today and it's not going to go away. So what you see on your screen right now is when I actually capitalized on the gains and I sold out of Meta once they shot back up from about 89, 88 bucks a share to 241. Because for me, the inherent worth for Facebook at the time was about 225, 230 a share. I did not know they're going to hit 300. Let alone $600, $700 a share. So I feel like I jumped ship a little too early, but I feel like buying into the company and holding on for about 9 months, and then 3xing my money, going from about $90 a share to $241, I'm a pretty happy camper. Now, when I made the decision to jump into Meta, I was actually with M1 Finance. I cannot stand that brokerage platform. I really do not like it, and I cannot recommend it. So at the end of 2022, I closed my account and I shifted all of my money over into a more old school, traditional brokerage modality, and I've been a happy camper ever since. So I only have the receipts of when I sold, and because I closed my account with M1 Finance, I can't show you my cost basis. It was like $90, $91 a share. Pretty happy guy. So all that to say, I made a fortune with Meta in the past, and right now I'm seeing another opportunity. Do you see where I'm trying to come from right now? Unless you learn from your mistakes, history tends to repeat itself. And I feel like I'm seeing the exact same opportunity. Now, granted, at the time, I wasn't making videos for this YouTube channel, so I didn't publicly talk about my play, because I think I started uploading videos at the end of 2023. But anyways, before I get ahead of myself, let's go ahead and talk about what exactly is Meta and how do they make money, just in case you're not in the know, okay? I feel like everybody is familiar with WhatsApp, Instagram, Threads, but just in case you're not, okay? So on the surface level, Meta is just a social media giant. But what I want to argue with you is that underneath it all, it's really a massive advertising business. Its revenue depends on marketing budgets and advertising cycles, which, it's not the greatest thing in the world, but it tends to fluctuate. So there's going to be inherent ebbs and flows when you think about marketing campaigns. It's not like a Fortune 500 company is always going to be throwing down billions of dollars to promote their next product or service. There's going to be seasonality baked in to their revenue. And it's also worth noting that they make a smaller portion of their revenue from the Reality Labs. And that's their business segment that's responsible for the VR eyewear. I feel like right now there's a lot of hype surrounding the Oculus and the Ray-Bans, and they also make some money from subscription tools like Facebook for Business and whatnot. And whether you love him or you hate him, Zuckerberg's pretty much a cockroach. Whenever you put him down, he finds a way to get back from the ashes. I mean, I remember just a handful of years ago, Snapchat, dude, they had Facebook. Their butthole was puckering and they were sweating because they were like, oh my gosh, what is our answer to Snapchat? Because I feel like in 2015, 2016, 2017, there was so much hype surrounding Snapchat. You could think of it as like TikTok 10 years ago. How did Zuckerberg respond? Well, they introduced Instagram Stories, which was essentially Snapchat. You posted a photo or a video or an image and it disappeared within 24 hours, which is basically the value add that Snapchat provided for its young users. Now you fast forward to today and Zuckerberg's doing the exact same thing. Because right now I feel like with Twitter and Elon Musk, it's pretty controversial. Okay, he's also a very polarizing figure. So consequently, there's a lot of social media platforms that emulate the Twitter platform, like 120, 160, or maybe even like 200 characters of text at a time, like microblogging. There's like Blue Sky, and there's also Threads. So Facebook implemented their own version of Twitter, and as of right now, at the time of making this video, it has more monthly active users than Twitter. And that's not because Threads was so innovative and it's life-changing, but rather it's integrated into the whole Facebook ecosystem. Like if you have an Instagram account, you automatically have a Threads account. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to activate it. So all that to say, when you think about the social media landscape, Zynga, MySpace, yes, the big giants, they came and they went, they're gone. But when it comes to Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, Threads, this is a company at its heart and soul. Whenever there's disruption in their industry, they respond by making an exact same product, except they label it something else. So when I think about their economic moat, I think it's pretty wide. And now let's go ahead and talk about the recent developments surrounding this company, i.e. their earnings report. They just posted their earnings about a week and a half ago, and let me tell you this, it was spectacular. Well, it was beautiful with a little blemish, and we'll get into that. So the revenue, it was up by 26% year over year. Their advertising revenue was up by 25.5% year over year. And Reality Labs, remember, it's the division of their business that's responsible for their eyewear. It made up $470 million of revenue. However, this is where it gets kind of ugly. They missed the bottom line expectations. Now, when I say that, what does that mean? It means their profits per share did not meet the expectations of Wall Street. And I will expand on that here in a little bit. But what really made Wall Street angry is the fact that Zuckerberg went on record by saying that they were going to aggressively spend on capital expenditures, also known as capex, for AI and to stay relevant and to stay competitive in the AI race. Now, here's what I'm trying to say. I feel like the leadership team on the earnings call, I feel as if deep down inside, as a business guy, it could have worded it a little differently, right? To make it more palatable, to be more presentable and the tone of it. Because the way that they said it, it just felt like desperation, directionless. Like, we're going to be doing this, but we're not exactly sure what the end game is. Like, we're going to be spending all this money for AI. And they were hoping that the buzzword AI was going to be enough to make the stock moon. But did it moon? No, they sold off. The stock went down immediately by like 9-10% into the red. Now, personally, I'm not against the whole idea of capex if it makes business sense. Like, say that right now your bandwidth has been completely maxed out, and for you to service more customers, you need to increase your infrastructure. It makes all the sense in the world to me to build another data center or another factory. Like, you have a supply chain throttle. But in the case of Meta, aka Facebook, there's no forecast for their 2026 capex plans, meaning they're going to be spending billions and billions of dollars without a clear vision. Now, they might be keeping it under the books and saying, ha ha ha, this is what we're working on and we don't want to tell anyone. Between you and me, I genuinely think they don't really have a game plan. They're just going to be going on the drawing board and aggressively thinking about new ways to implement AI into their VR headsets or into their social media platforms. But all that to say, I think this whole capex spending for AI and them getting sold off, it really, really does remind me of the metaverse fears. Like, if we jump into a time machine together when your hairline was a little less receded, 2022, I remember the exact same narrative, right? Like, what is this company doing? Why are they losing users? Why aren't they being more responsible with the excess cash that they have on their books? And we'll be looking at the numbers and the data here in a little bit. This is a company that is flush in cash. I think they can afford to mess around a little bit, to experiment, because their core business advertising revenue, it prints cash. But circling back to their earnings call, they also hinted at the fact that they're going to have higher expenses going forward because they're going to be increasing their SG&A, which is the compensation that you pay to your employees. And it's noted in the income statement. And they said the reason being is that they want to acquire the best talent out there. It doesn't matter who you work for. Dude, Zuckerberg is coming for you. If you work for OpenAI, if you work for Tesla, if you work for a dingy little startup in Israel, it doesn't matter. He's coming for you. He wants to acquire the best AI engineers out here. And so consequently, how is that going to affect their financials? It's going to temporarily lower the profitability, because now the cost to do business just went up, because now you're paying millions, if not billions of dollars in order to hire the best engineers out here. And here's a head scratcher that I want you to ponder about. They just laid off 600 AI team members with the goal and objective to start over. They clean house, got rid of everybody, and they want to do it again. And I tried to think about it. I'm like, hold on, you just fired everybody in your AI division and you're hiring other people, external candidates to come into the company. And it's like, does that really make sense? And I try to think about it on a higher level, like in an executive vision wise. And I think it's because Zuckerberg, to his standard, they just weren't meeting it, right? They weren't good enough, or they were moving too slow, or their visions weren't aligned. So I think it's a risky gamble, because those 600 employees that Meta just laid off, they're also going to receive a severance package. So Meta, they're definitely going to be taking a sack tap. Dude, do you remember that in the 90s and the early 2000s? You would go up to your friend and go, hit them right in the nuts. But it is going to hurt them in the short term. And when I say short term, I'm talking about for the next year to 3 years, because they want to restart their AI endeavors. And also, to get into more of the specifics for the capex, they're planning on, at a minimum, spending $600 billion in order to build out data centers going into 2028. That's at a minimum. So friends and family, Meta, they could spend up to $900 billion. Can you imagine that for a second? So Facebook itself is one of the primary drivers as to why NVIDIA and AMD are being so successful. They're considered one of the hyperscalers. If they weren't spending that much money, then that would also lower the valuation of NVIDIA and AMD, because then their revenue for their chips would also decrease. So in a way, that AI bubble, that circle, it's contingent upon all of these Mag 7 and hyperscalers spending a crap ton of money for each other. It's like a little food chain that just goes in a circle. It kind of makes sense, but it also is scary when you take a step back and you consider the variables. It's like, oh my gosh. There's like 10 or 11 companies that are just pumping money into each other, that tiny little bubble. If anything goes wrong, if one of them says, all right, we're done, we're jumping ship, we don't want to spend anymore because the ROI for building out these data centers, it's not going to be worth it for us, it can cause the entire thing to come tumbling down. So it's kind of scary to fathom. And now let's talk about why they missed their bottom line per share, also known as the earnings per share. So if I break this down on a quarterly level, by the way, their gross sales for this quarter, talking about the past 90 days, only 3 months. When I tell you that they print cash, you think I was exaggerating? No, $51.2 billion. Year over year, it grew by 26.2%. If I show you this visually, this is exactly what you want to see in a dividend compounder with cheese. They are literally aggressively growing their revenue at a point where their stock price follows suit. I mean, just take a look at this, right? 2015, in 3 months, they generated $5.8 billion. And in the past 3 months, in the most recent times, $51.2 billion. Dude, what I'm trying to say is that there's S&P 500 companies out here where in the span of 1 year, let alone 5 years, they don't make $51.2 billion. This company does that in 3 months. But anyways, I said let's focus on their bottom line per share, right? So their EPS was $1.05. Now, what I want you to observe is that year over year, so what is this, Q3 2025? So Q3 of 2024, it was $6.03. It decreased 82.6% year over year. That's pretty freaking bad, right? And I feel like this is kind of sad to see. As leading up to this earnings, their profits per share was on a very amazing trajectory, and it was beautiful to see, right? But now it fell off a cliff. So what happened? It's because Meta's tax rate, it spiked to 87% for this quarter because of a one-time non-cash reduction in deferred tax assets, because the tax code changed for a lot of the corporations out here due to the big, beautiful bill. So in plain English, in case you didn't take an accounting class, it means that there was an adjustment made on their numbers and their valuation of their assets that made the reported tax bill look gigantic, look massive. So we're talking about $15.9 billion of taxes on paper. Even though they didn't actually pay that amount, it wasn't a cash loss. It's the valuation of their assets just being reduced. And so consequently, the accounting and finance team over at Facebook, they had to mark down the value of future tax breaks they've been carrying on the books. Otherwise, what I want to show you is that their net income would have been a lot prettier, because we're talking about a $15.9 billion hit on the bottom line. Now, fundamentally, I really wasn't bothered by their EPS dropping, 83%, because it was a paper loss rather than them taking a cash loss. Like if they lost money coming out of their pockets, I think that would suck. So let me just illustrate this really quickly. So the net income is also referred to as the bottom line, the profits that are left over after accounting for all of the overhead costs in order to run your business. When you think about the compensation for your employees, when you think about the research and development to expand your capacity and innovation, when you think about the insurance and the utility bills and everything else, right? So $2.7 billion of profits. And when you think about the shares outstanding, taking into account stock-based compensation, it's 2.5 billion shares outstanding. So their earnings per share was $1.05. But watch what happens if we add back in that paper loss. I think that was a little too big. I went a little overboard right there. So 15.93, let me pull up my calculator right here. That way we don't make too many mistakes, right? So $15.93 billion, and we add it back to the 2.709. So $18.6 billion of profits was actually what they generated, okay? And if we divide it by the amount of shares outstanding, 2.57, then the real earnings per share is $7.25, as you can see right there, $7.25. So when you think about it, quarter over quarter, not only did their earnings per share go from $7.14 to $7.25, when you think about it year over year, $6.03 to that of $7.25, it sounds a lot better, right? So once you understand the numbers and the math, it's like, that was actually pretty good. That was a really good financial performance in that quarter. It's just this tax loss, and it's just the capex for their AI data centers and the whole SG&A to hire the best AI talent. Those are the tangible negatives you want to take into account, and I feel like it's not that bad. The reason why I'm sidetracked is because when I look outside my window right now, it's so beautiful here in Japan. The leaves are orange, red, yellow. It's beautiful. I think autumn and the fall, when there's an overcast and it's cloudy every single day, I'm a happy guy. I love this type of weather. So as you can see, things are not too bad. Now, in the next segment of the video, we're going to be calculating an intrinsic valuation. Like, what's the inherent worth of this company right now? So I'll tell you what, I think they're undervalued. I'll stand by what I said in the beginning of the video. Now, because they're spending a lot of money on their capex, I genuinely do not think the free cash flow would make any sense in order to evaluate this company, because it's going to be temporarily throttled and make their free cash flow output look worse than it is, right? But I also don't think it makes sense to calculate an inherent worth based on their dividend profile. So personally, what Wall Street likes to evaluate the Mag 7 with is their earnings per share and the forecast of the growth of their profits per share, right? So what you see on your screen right now, this is what I am thinking. Now, these are the actual numbers that Meta has posted in 2025 thus far. Q1, it was $6.43. Q2, it was $7.14. And Q3, obviously, it should be $7.25, but we'll go ahead and play with reality instead of manipulating the numbers. So $1.05, because the manipulation is coming up soon. Now, for Q4 2025, what I am projecting is that their earnings per share should be $10.50. Now, you might be like, dude, that is way too high. However, if you take a look at their numbers, their EPS, it's been growing year over year at a rate of like 30, 40, 50, 60, 90% year over year. So I'm going on the lower end. So $10.50 if the Q4 EPS comes out to being 30% year over year. Now, obviously, they could also experience another setback with a non-cash loss on their income statement, and this could also be like $1.05. If that happens again, Meta will shoot down to $400, $300 a share. But anyways, if they finish out the year with $10.50 and you add it all up, the projected EPS that I'm proposing is going to be $25.12. Now, when you look at the expectations from the analysts that are covering this company, the average EPS that they're calculating is $27.82. So do keep in mind that I'm being very, very conservative with the numbers that I'm plugging in, because we're manipulating the numbers in order to calculate the price going forward. And as you can see on your screen right now, I just had to refresh it, their current trading multiple is a 27.5. But if you turn your eyes to the future, their forward trading multiple is a 20.9. And I think that's more accurate, because with a growth company, your eyes should be looking forward into the future, but also this takes away those one-time tax losses that might affect and influence the current trading multiple. Like we see right now, right? That $15.9 billion tax loss. So Meta's future forward PE is a 20.9. That's pretty low, because when you think about their 10-year historical PE ratio on average, 29.5. Now in 2022, it was a single-digit number, but when you mesh it all together, a 29.5. And it's not just their forward trading multiple that's really low. If we were to replace and plug in $7.25 into the Q3 2025 EPS, then for the trailing 12 months, the bottom line per share is $28.84. And if we take the current trading price for Meta, which is $621, and you divide it by $28.84, which is the EPS, then the current PE ratio is a 21.5. Friends and family, very low. And when you think about it, Facebook, they're currently experiencing a sell-off, right? Day after day, they're ending it in the red. So if their current PE ratio drops from a 27 down to meet their forward trading multiple of a 20.9, and you finish out the year at a 21, now mind you, we only have about a month and a half, 2 months to go, then I think worst case scenario in a realistic sense, $527 if their trading multiple is a 21. However, if they do in fact change the narrative and they jump back up to their historical PE ratio of a 29.5, then I think Meta could rebound back up to 741. Do I see that happening? Realistically, I don't want to be a bear. I don't want to be mean. I don't want to poke you in the left nipple, but I don't see that happening. I think somewhere in between, I think like 650 to 699 is probable and more likely, especially in 45 days. But 527, I also think on the other end of that spectrum, that also seems a little unlikely. So somewhere in between, I think that's a safe bet. And if we turn our eyes to the next year and beyond, if Facebook gets the Google treatment and their PE ratio is suppressed, and it's 21 right now, and the next year rebounds up to like a 22, following year a 23, and so forth. Because for the longest time, Google's PE ratio was like a 15, 16, 17. Now it's like a 28, 29, and they're more in line with the beautiful company that they are. But if Meta gets that exact same treatment, because Google's harsh treatment lasted for years, okay? If we fast forward to 2028, if Meta's PE ratio is a 24, which is way below the S&P 500's average PE ratio of a 31, then Meta should be $946 a share, contingent upon their EPS being $39.43. Best case scenario, if they go back up to their historical PE ratio, this is the average. I'm not making this part up. If they go back up to a 29.5 PE ratio and the valuation of this company is seen with positivity from Wall Street, then $1,163. Now, I think somewhere in between is more likely, like let's just say break even $1,000 a share, 2028. Meta, as of right now, around $600 a share. I think that's pretty eye-opening. And before you think I'm being ridiculous with the $39.43 of profits per share, because right now it's only $25, right? If you look at the analysts' estimates and forecasts, they're also proposing like $49 all the way down to $32. I'm somewhere in the middle, slightly higher than the average of $38. I think it's in the realm of possibilities as long as they don't face these one-off tax punches to the face quarter after quarter. And I promise you we're going to be examining their numbers a little closer here in a little bit. But before we get to that point, let's talk about the compounder chart. Now, what you see on your screen right now are all of the various companies that we have analyzed on this channel in the past 5 months. If you pause this video and you're curious about Clorox, or if you're curious about MP Materials or Salesforce, you'll find it on the channel. Now, where does Facebook fall among these companies? All the way to the left side of your screen, certified compounders, okay? Google and Amazon, my conviction level is really high. I think they're in the S tier. As we move down to the right side and we're in the middle, the C tier, this is an average company. They're on the watch list, wait list, meaning it's not the best investment choice in the world, but it's far from being the worst. Because the worst, friends and family, it's on the right-hand side. This is the F tier, the CAGR graveyard, the compound annual growth rate graveyard, meaning your money invested into Chime Finance or Carter's not exactly going to be the wisest thing, because you can expect a CAGR of like 3, 4, or maybe 5% year over year. Whereas with Google and Amazon, your CAGR should be closer to like 15, 18, or even like 24% year over year. Having said that, where does Meta fall? And before I place them on this map, I want to mention them. Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. They're peers in the Mag 7. They're the leaders in the cloud computing world that provides a direct return on investment. So whenever they build out a data center, it's because they're trying to reach more customers that are on the wait list or to serve them better. So when Amazon throws down billions of dollars in order to increase their bandwidth, it's because they're proactively building for future demand. However, when we think about Meta, they don't have a cloud business segment. So for them to be spending $600 billion to 2028, it doesn't really justify that amount of money. Like if we were talking about 50, maybe 60 billions of dollars, I feel like Wall Street would be like, well, that's only about 1/4's worth of gross sales revenue. Not too bad. But to be spending $600 billion, dude, I'm not trying to be the bad guy, but this kind of looks like Zuckerberg is chasing the AI bubble trend by spending billions of dollars because their peers are, and it's FOMO, the fear of missing out. He feels like he needs to spend this much money in order to stay competitive in the race. But then again, when you look at the numbers, there's 3.5 billion daily users when you think about the three main Facebook apps: Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. That's almost half of the world's population. If you throw in Facebook Messenger, then the monthly active user count bumps up to 4 billion users. I think the only country that doesn't really use any of the Facebook products is China. But having said that, 4 billion people around the world are utilizing their services, and you have to shift your mindset of just thinking about Facebook as a social media company, but instead as an advertising business, right? Because they're serving ads whenever you're scrolling, sponsored posts and whatnot. So if you are an enterprise, a corporation, or even a small business, and you're trying to sell a product or a service, that's why it makes all the sense in the world to buy ads on Instagram and Facebook. And I think that's their value add. Their massive scale in the amount of people that are logging in order to check up on grandpa, in order to post pictures of their dogs and their kids. And then alongside with that, they're going to be seeing sponsored posts that are paid for by the various businesses. And you might be like, who the heck's going to pay for that? Dude, $50 billion worth of ad money coming into the company, okay? They print cash. So having said that, where does Facebook fall on the compounder chart? I think they're an A+. They just missed the mark of being an S tier because, like I said, they're spending all this money for the AI endeavors, but they don't really have a formulated, concrete game plan of where they're driving the ship. They're basically driving in the fog, which means you slow down a little bit, but you also can't see what's 200 feet ahead of you. So that causes me to hesitate to put them into the S tier. However, Meta really does remind me of Google in that they're best in class when it comes to social media advertising. Like Google's YouTube, phenomenal. Facebook's Instagram and Threads, phenomenal. So I can't knock that against them. Now, depending on my mood, I definitely think that Meta could also drop as far as like a B+, but I do think they're inherently an A caliber of a company. Above average, an excellent, a beautiful stock. So if you're invested into Meta, I don't blame you. I'm personally not invested into them, but without any bias, hesitation, or emotions or feelings being involved, if we take a look at their numbers, I do think they're in the A tier. Now, having said that, let's go ahead and look at their numbers. I'm using a platform called stockanalysis.com. I have a referral link down below that allows you to sign up for Stock Analysis Pro. Gives you 10% off on top of whatever promo they have going on. The first thing that I want to be taking a look at, oh shoot, I zoomed in a little too much. The first thing we're going to be taking a look at is their income statement. What I want to see is that their top line is increasing year over year. It's phenomenal, right? In 2022, they did have a little hiccup. It went from $117 billion down to $116 billion, but they rebounded and they're growing it at a very aggressive rate. I mean, to be growing it at a faster pace since 2023, up 15.6% year over year to 21.2%, phenomenal. I don't care who you are, a 21% growth rate in your revenue, that is absolutely phenomenal. And the cost to do business, the cost of revenue is $34 billion to that of $189 billion in the past 1 year. So their gross profit is $155 billion. But then again, that's kind of biased because Facebook is fundamentally a software company that also happens to sell eyewear. So of course their profit margins are going to be through the roof. But as we scroll on down to take a look at their profits per share since 2015, going from $1.29 to that of $22.63 in the past 12 months, pretty darn impressive. Now remember, based on our financial model, we're predicting that they'll finish out fiscal year 2025 at $25. 25 for 25. It's pretty catchy. And if we jump on over to the next financial document, take a look at their balance sheet. Few things that I'm looking at here. I'm taking a look at their cash and cash equivalent situation. As of right now, it's $44 billion of cash on hand. You tell me, does that sound juicy? Because I think that sounds pretty juicy. If this company feels like it, they can throw down $10 billion right now to acquire an emerging social media platform. They can throw down $5 billion right now in order to get rid of some lawsuits that they're facing with right now. And the next thing I want to take a look at is their total debt situation. And it is aggressively growing, and that's because they're probably taking out the loans in order to help fund their capex endeavors. For me, that's a yellow flag, because when you take all of their cash and cash equivalents on hand to pay down the debts that they have on the books, this includes everything that's due in a month and everything else that's due in 5 to 20 years from now, they'll have a remaining $6.6 billion of loans on the books. However, realistically, you would never use the cash on the books to pay down your debts, right? Instead, you would use your operating income, the EBITDA, to figure that out. And so if we jump on over to the ratios tab to look at their debt to EBITDA ratio, you want to see something that's 3 or less. For Facebook, it would take them about half a year from their own income to pay off all the loans on the books. That's what that 0.5 stands for. Anything that's 3 or less is phenomenal. A 0.5 tells me that the loans and the debt that they're carrying is not bad at all, okay? Now, jumping on over to the cash flow statement, I think the big one, the only one I truly care about is the free cash flow, and I think this one is going to be suppressed, taking into consideration the capex. So right there, $62.7 billion of capital expenditures. It is growing at a very aggressive rate, and that's because in 2017 and 2018, there was no such thing as like the AI hyperscaler data center movement. But as of right now, that is the name of the game, right? So $62.7 billion, and it's only going to get worse. So when we think about their free cash flow, it shrank 14.3% year over year, and I think it's going to decrease more and more as we progress, because even though they are generating more free cash flow, because more cash is coming into the company, they're also shooting it right back out their booty hole in order to build out these data centers. And that's why I was saying the free cash flow might not be the best way to judge and evaluate this company, because their free cash flow is going to be taking a hit until at least 2028. And when we think about how they generate their revenue quarter over quarter, year after year, in the past 3 months, $50 billion from advertisements. That's why I told you, you need to start thinking about Facebook as like the trade desk. You need to think about it as like the Amazon DSP, advertising. Everything else, like the Reality Labs, the eyewear, $470 million, and the payment processing for stuff that you buy on Facebook Marketplace, $690 million. And what makes this really impressive is if we just zoom back to, what is this, July of 2022, $28 billion. They have effectively grown their revenue from $28 billion to $50 billion in the span of 3 years. Dude, that is crazy. Here's where I'm coming from. I think the worry for me and other potential investors or current shareholders is that will Meta's ROI, with all the money that they're spending on their AI endeavors, will it be worth it? Will it be a bust, or will it produce beautiful fruit? Because the work and the sweat equity that you put in today, you will reap your rewards later, right? But when it comes to this AI endeavor, without really having a concrete vision, it makes me hesitate. I'm not going to lie to you. But it doesn't take away from the fact that I still think they're undervalued. When we think about the Mag 7, it's hard for me to say this, but I do think Meta is the most pound for pound undervalued at the current time of making this video on November the 8th. Previously, that title was held by Amazon. Now, just speculating here, I'm pulling things right out of my booty hole. I'm guessing with their AI capex spending, I think one realm that they can tap into is implementing advertisements in their little glasses. Like whenever you're doing this or that, you see a little ad show up right in the lens. I don't know if they do that or not, because I don't have a pair of Facebook eyewear, but I wouldn't dismiss the idea of Meta probably implementing a tiny little fee in order to get rid of those ads. That's what I'm thinking they're going to do. But also, if they're building out these data centers, I'm thinking they have something up their sleeve, right? It's not just to support the infrastructure of Facebook and Instagram. I'm also thinking they do have a more strategic plan, because I don't think Zuckerberg is going to let the metaverse go away. I think it's going to be integrated into whatever they're trying to create right now. Because if you're familiar with the World of Warcraft, you could be like an orc, a night elf, or whatever, and you walk around that universe. That's essentially what the metaverse is, but I'm assuming there's also going to be billboards with advertisements in that alternate universe in reality. So I'm thinking that's where the future of Meta is going to go. Now, I do not know. I'm speculating, okay? All that to say, hopefully their roadmap to monetize the AI spending, it makes sense. Because as of right now, I'm not going to lie to you, I think the concerns and fears, it's warranted in regards to the capex spending. It is a little alarming, because if they're just spending the capex in order to play into the AI bubble, then this is a hot mess of a business that I would absolutely avoid. But I think Meta, their DNA, timeline, and their history, I think whenever they do throw down money in about a year to 2 years, I think we can all see in hindsight, like, wow, that was a great plan, Zuckerberg. Dude, you can't dismiss it. He's a pretty smart guy. He's not just going to be spending money to piss down a toilet, right? So when I think about Meta, I definitely think this is a very good example of GARP, growth at a reasonable price. 621, it is a little steep, but the trading multiple, 27, historically a 29. The forward trading multiple, 20.9, not too bad. So in my personal opinion, if I have been chasing all year dumpster fire companies that were near their one-year lows, and I'm sick and tired of it, I think Meta would be absolutely and drastically different to that. Because even though they might not be as cheap as some of these cigarette butt companies, I think their future is pretty promising. Friends and family, we're talking about Meta. We're not talking about some speculative nonsense company. This is a company that is profitable. This is a company that prints cash. This is a company where the gross sales is $50 billion in 90 days. However, I don't want to paint a Picasso picture, because when I think about it, is Meta the best opportunity in the market right now? I don't think so. Actually, I don't know, but I don't think so. Because I'm also contemplating the Trade Desk, ticker symbol TTD. They also just reported their earnings, and it was phenomenal. They crushed across the board. They dropped off a rock. Think about their stock price history right now, $43. They're effectively the lowest price they've been in the past 1 year. The only blemish, friends and family, is that their capex is going to increase from $5 million to $20 million. And they're justifying that because they have to improve their infrastructure to support the ads across all the various places on the internet and streaming services. You would think a company that's this deep into the red and being sold off to this degree, they would be unprofitable. They would be declining year over year. But you tell me, I think this looks phenomenal, doesn't it? And I'll be transparent with you. I'm not invested into either one, but I think Meta versus the Trade Desk, I think by the end of the weekend, I'll make my decision and I'll post that on Patreon. Speaking of which, if you love this type of content and you want to support the channel, would you please consider joining the Patreon? There's exclusive content that's up there that never makes its way onto YouTube, and it really helps me out in order to keep making videos. And unrelated to the video, I just wanted to keep you in the loop on how things are going. I'm at almost 4 weeks as a first-time dad. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, I am so exhausted. And my ability to regulate my emotions, to be kind, it's tested multiple times a day. I would argue multiple times an hour. I think the frustration, I think the irritation, I think the why can't you just, you know what I mean? It's starting to get to me. And I think the lack of quality of sleep is just making it all harder. The difficulty level is just going up from pro to expert. It's kind of hard. But the good news is that the little potato making good gains and progress. As a matter of fact, I've been doing tummy time with her ever since day one. And we're finally at the point where she can support her own neck and she does this, which I think is pretty cool. because apparently some people, they don't even start tummy time until their newborn is like 8 weeks old. But I'm like, no, I believe in her. She can do it. And at 3 weeks, she can do it now. So I'm like, dang, dude, that is really cool. But I will say this. Besides her achievement and milestone, it's being a dad and taking care of a newborn. It's kind of like taking care of your friend on his first night out drinking. Like he just turned 21. You're going out to the bars. It's, he has one too many drinks. It's a mess, right? In the span of 5 minutes, just the other night, she pooped, peed, and puked on me when I was feeding her and changing her diaper. And I kept thinking to myself, I was like, dude, this is wild. Because in any other circumstances, there would be at least some gratitude or some feedback from the other person. At least the next day when they sober up, they would be like, thanks, dude, you had my back. But with a little potato, there's nothing but tears and sleeping and vomiting or pooping. And it's just one of those things where I'm learning the lesson of unconditional love, where regardless of if I just change their diaper and she poops again in the next 20 seconds and I'm like, I just changed it. No matter what she does, the ability to love another human, regardless of what they do, to continue to love them and to protect them and to raise them. I think dogs teach us that lesson as well, because no matter how good or bad your day went, when you come home from work, your dogs are super excited to meet you, right? A clean slate, just full of energy and excitement to see you. And I think that's the kind of attitude that I'm trying to bring to the table, but it's so hard to do that. Now, luckily, she doesn't, the lights are on, but nobody's home, right? So she doesn't know when I feel frustrated. So I'm trying to get to the point where when she does have the ability to have conscious thought and to formulate memories, I don't ever want her to remember when I get frustrated or annoyed at why is this happening. Instead, I only want her to remember dang, my dad was patient. My dad was kind. My dad was forgiving. So hopefully I can get to that point. As of right now, I think I'm too far from being the type of person that I want. But anyways, if you made it to the end of the video, I just want to say thank you so much for continuing to support me during this difficult time, especially when my ops tempo and upload schedule has been reduced dramatically. By watching the video all the way through, you really do help me out and the channel. So I am so thankful for you. I love you. Have a good rest of your day. Good luck in the stock market, and please stay safe out there. There's a lot of crazy people and a lot of nonsense happening around this world. Just stay safe. Okay, have some situational awareness. Look over your shoulder from time to time. Be aware of your surroundings. Okay, I'll talk to you guys next time.